Okay, so for number 27, we do have a line reference in the question, lines 70 to 71. But this is a good example of why it's good to kind of always be thinking about the other questions that are coming and looking at future line references and all of that, because if we just look ahead for a second, we can see that 28 is linked to 27. These are one of those evidence pairs, and that means that 27 is going to be much easier for us to do if we've also done 28 at the same time. So we really need to do these as a pair. And a mistake is just to read 27, dive in, answer that question, and then realize too late that 28 could have helped you. So that's the first thing. But even beyond that, I'd love to know what other line references I've got going on here so that I can maybe narrow down some of these choices using the chronology rule. But if we do that, if we look at some of these other questions, line 38 was the line reference from number 26, which comes before. And then number 29 has a really big line reference, 65 to 84. So 38 to 84 is pretty big. And notice all of these line references fit in that range. Yeah, if I started with 65, that would restrict some of these. But generally with the chronology rule, you want to be a little bit more expansive. If something's overlapping, you probably want to include it. So to me, the chronology rule here is not very helpful. It's not going to help me eliminate any of these choices. It's not going to give me a little bit of a boost if I need to guess. And it also is confusing because 70 to 71 makes me think that maybe it has to be choice D because that would follow the chronology rule, right? That's the only one that's after this line reference. But we can't think that way, unfortunately. These questions are a pair, they're a unit. And so that 70 to 71 is kind of like off on its own. It's really the chronology, the line references in 26 and 29 that affect the chronology. I know that that's confusing, and this is the trouble with the chronology rule, is there are lots of weird exceptions and things like that. I still think it's very useful because in many cases it can kind of put you over the limit and give you a reason to pick the right answer. But here is not one of those cases. It's annoying, but it's what it is. So what we need to do is still do these as a pair. We do want to kind of look at 70 to 71. What are they saying here? Theus thinks the bees were repelled not by the fragrance itself, but by the abundance of beetles. The data showed that the more beetles on a flower, the less likely a honeybee was to visit it. So, okay, the beetles are the problem. So I might jot that down instead of just trying to remember it. But if we now go to these line references, we're hoping to get even more information about the beetles and the fragrance and all this science. So let's look at 45 to 50. That's right here. That's choice A. So every half hour throughout the experiments, the team plucked all the beetles off of half the fragrance-enhanced flowers and half the control flowers, allowing bees to respond to the blossoms with and without interference by beetles. Okay, so this is about beetles. Beetles seem to be important. This is about beetles. It's also about fragrance. So there's this good mix of the fragrance and the beetles. I don't need to dive any deeper than that for now. I'm just going to trust that that might be right and leave it in the mix. Let's see if I need to look at any other choices, if any are better. Line in the reference B, 51 to 53, says, finally, they pollinated by hand half of the female flowers in each of the 4 combinations of fragrance and beetles. Okay, so that's also about fragrance and beetles. They're pollinating it. So, okay, maybe I keep this in. This seems a little different. I'm not trying to understand the science. I'm just going to eliminate anything that's nonsense. 59 to 61. That's right here. We would be out there at 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning to try and set up before these flowers open. Okay, that's completely irrelevant. That's just a statement about how hard it was to do this experiment. I don't really care. It has nothing to do with the beetles or the fragrance. 76 to 79. Gourds that developed from those blossoms weighed 9% less and had on average 20 fewer seeds than those from normal flowers. Well, that's not about the fragrance. That's not about the beetles. I don't know what that's about. So that seems random too. So it's either A or B here. I'd be pretty confident in that. Now we can go to the choices in 27 to try to better understand how these line references fit in with the question. So again, why were they able to reason that the bees were repelled not by the fragrance itself, but by the beetles? A, they observed the behavior of bees and beetles both before and after the flowers opened in the morning. Okay. I don't really remember them observing the beetles' behavior. I don't remember this element of time before and after the flowers open in the morning. I could go back and reread a little bit here, but I don't see anything about morning or flowers opening. They talk about every half hour, so time doesn't really seem to match up with the way the time is described in this choice. I wouldn't necessarily eliminate A, but I don't feel strongly that it's right. B, they increase the presence of 1,4-dimethoxybenzene only during the August flowering season. I don't know. This is a very specific choice. A lot of science here that I don't remember reading about. C, they compared the gourds that developed from naturally pollinated flowers to the gourds that developed from hand-pollinated flowers. Well, it's not about the gourds. It's about the beetles. It's about the way that the beetles and the bees interacted. So this doesn't seem right either. D, they gave bees a chance to choose between beetle-free enhanced flowers and beetle-free normal flowers. Oh, okay, so the beetles are there. That seems pretty good. What's going on with the line references? So every half hour throughout the experiments, the team plucked all the beetles off of half the fragrance-enhanced flowers and half the control flowers, allowing bees to respond to the blossoms with and without interference by the beetles. So the bees could choose different kinds of flowers and different kinds of beetle populations. This is the answer here. D matches with A because they're both kind of saying the same thing about how the experiment was conducted. They were trying to figure out whether the beetles or the fragrance mattered, and so they divided these flowers into different groups that had different combinations of more fragrance, normal fragrance, more beetles, less beetles, all this stuff. And so that's what line reference A is saying, that they picked those beetles off. And so the bees were given a choice, not just based on beetles, but based on fragrance too. Honestly, most of my reasoning here is just that there's a lot of words that are really similar, and it feels good enough that I'm like, yeah, I would pick this and move on. This might be one that I star, though, and that if I have time at the end of the section, I would come back and be like, let me just make sure that this one is right, because I don't feel like I truly grasped the science. But that is okay. You're not going to 100% understand every question as you do it. The goal is to get to a point, 80, 85, 90% confidence, where it's good enough and it's going to get you most of the questions right. And then, yeah, there'll be some errors here and there, but hopefully you've at least saved enough time to come back to those particular questions and spend a little bit more time on them. For now, though, this would have been enough, and it would have gotten me the right answers.